Things are very important to actually stop. And so it's a time when we're on our feet constantly. This is our legal counsel right here, Harak Shah, and he came over with me from the State House having his head buried in some very important things that we're going to try to do tomorrow relative to what we do with juvenile murderers that have been convicted in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And just to give you a little bit of history on that and why it's so important, in Massachusetts, there was a case that was handed down on Christmas Eve of last year, 2013. And in that case, called Diachenko, the Supreme Judicial Court essentially said that Massachusetts can no longer have the penalty of life without parole for juvenile murders. They essentially invalidated the Massachusetts statute that provided that and made that decision retroactive, which means that in the Commonwealth at that moment, 63 convicted murderers who had gone through trial, who had been properly charged, properly convicted, they got another chance at parole. And so it's imperative that the legislature act sometime before the end of July on that issue. And we're going to argue the issue of constitutionality about whether we can act retroactively in the way that the court did, but we're certainly going to make that argument tomorrow. But most importantly, if we do nothing, the penalty in Massachusetts going forward for juvenile murderers would be 15 years before first parole eligibility, and you may remember that they had life without parole prior to that. And so we offered a bill that we thought was as much as we could reasonably achieve constitutionally, which was to create a 35-year first eligibility for parole. We got a tremendous amount of support for that. Unfortunately, the bill that will be debated tomorrow by the Senate has a range of 20 to 30 years. And the problem with that is the penalty for second-degree murder is 15 to 25 years. So if we do nothing, there'll be overlap with this bill between the penalty for first-degree murder and the penalty for second-degree murder. So that's why we're a little bit occupied right now thinking about how we're going to deal with that tomorrow. We're going to offer a host of amendments. We're going to have a vigorous debate, and I promise you we'll do the very best we can to make sure that folks that are convicted of murder in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have an appropriate penalty. But mostly, what I wanted to talk to you about tonight is the fact that we are in a pivotal point. We're at a pivotal point to change the way that Massachusetts does business. And that's what I think we all need to be focused on. And if you look at the way that we are doing business, it creates the perfect opportunity for contrast. And what I mean by that is when you look around, you continuously see systemic failures of state government. You see a failure with the Department of Children and Families, who lost one child that was highly publicized, and there are others that can't be accounted for. You saw a situation with compounding pharmacies that were not properly overseen, and as a result, we exported death to other states in this country. You had a situation with the EBT cards, and folks being paid benefits, welfare benefits, from Massachusetts in the name of dead people. And you've seen a state crime lab with a lack of oversight. Right? I'm sorry?
None of your colleagues?
Not yet that I know of. Okay. You've seen a state crime lab where we actually had a situation because of improper oversight where the criminal justice system was seriously damaged. And that's costing us tens of millions of dollars to try to address, but also has a problem for the criminal justice system as a system and its integrity. So we continue to say that there's a different way to run state government. One that's more accountable, one that's more efficient, one that considers the taxpayer more than the current system does. And there's no better example of that than what you've seen most recently with regard to transportation. In 2009, the legislature passed a series of measures that were intended to save money in our transportation system. And essentially what we said is before you see any money, folks at the MBTA, folks at Mass DOT, folks in the Secretariat of Transportation, we want to achieve savings. And we made a public pronouncement that we were going to save $6.5 billion over the next period of years, and then we would think about how we were going to finance improvements to the transportation system. The fact of the matter is, the tax on gas fuels got increased, it got indexed to inflation, and yet when we ask how many of those $6.5 billion was saved, the answer we get is it's somewhere between $300 and $500 million. $300 and $500 million, and yet, once again, taxes were increased, indexed to inflation, more money was being put into that system. That's why we say there's a different way to do business. We saw it again just recently. We passed an economic development bill. We all agree that there ought to be economic development in the Commonwealth, and I'm suspecting that we would all agree that there's a role for state government to play. I would even say there's a role for some state expenditure there. But here's the problem. When we had that debate, which I made sure lasted all afternoon, because I wanted to make sure that folks understood the consequences of what they were doing, we had an economic development bill that came to the floor that spent directly about $55 million, and indirectly, if you put it all together, about $62.5 million. Our argument was, yes, some of that spending is appropriate, but what are we doing about trying to save businesses money as opposed to taking it from them, bringing it to Beacon Hill, and trying to spend some more of it to help them? Why wouldn't it be important to let them keep some of those funds, invest them in the economy, and grow it without having to send it to Beacon Hill first? And we made that argument all afternoon. At the end of the day, we didn't succeed as much as we would like, but we did achieve some success. And that's a point that I want to underscore for you, is that when you hear in elections that you can go to the Beacon Hill, you can go to the legislature as a member of the minority party, and you can't get anything done, you can't make a difference, that is absolutely not true. And there are countless examples of where we can make a difference. And I want to remind you that right now there are only 4 Republican senators. And I would suggest to you that if you can see what we've done with 4, you can just imagine the possibilities for each new senator that we elect and begin to grow the ranks of the people that say there is another way to do business in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So in that economic development bill, my argument throughout the afternoon was that we were espousing only a post-Keynesian economic theory, that spending government money was the only way to grow the economy. So again and again and again, we tried to confront the basic things that are involved in doing business in Massachusetts. What are the basic costs? What are the basic costs when this restaurant or any business in the Commonwealth, somebody goes every day and tries to manage it, and what do they think about? They think about the cost of workman's compensation. They think about the cost of unemployment insurance. They think about the cost of electricity. They think about the cost of health care. They think about those basic bread and butter issues that you have to deal with every day. Because for far too long in Massachusetts, when we think about economic development, we think about particular industries, and many of them are laudable, but we think about the life sciences, or we think about clean energy. We think about industries where Massachusetts has tried to pick winners and losers, as opposed to saying, let's have a set of change, and let's have a set of changes that help Main Street businesses as well as all of the other businesses as well. So we continue to try to fight for that. So, in that economic development package, we fought hard for a super research and development tax credit. It's something that's been tried in states like California and very few other states that would help us because we have confidence in research and development. We couldn't get that passed. We tried to have an amendment that would have a job creation tax credit, saying rather than spend money on job training programs, why don't we also spend money to help businesses that create jobs have a little bit of tax relief? We didn't get that, but we did get 3 things. And then we worked on this with the majority party. And as a result, we got an improvement to the research and development tax credit, making it easier to apply for and changing the base to make it more reasonable. We got transferability of historic district tax credits so that if someone bought a property that was in the middle of a renovation, that tax credit could actually be transferred to the new owner. Again, that was something that we agreed with the majority party about and we were able to get, and we also partnered on the sales tax holiday. Now let me suggest to you that I don't think the sales tax holiday is the be-all, end-all. I don't think it's the best tool for economic development, but I'll tell you this. When we have the kind of sales tax that we do in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we have border communities suffering because of it, I'll take any chance I can, any opportunity I can, to get some tax relief for those people. So we got those things. So don't let folks tell you that Republicans in the legislature are so marginal that they can't accomplish anything. But the point is also that if we had more Republicans, if we have more folks that actually understood what it takes to run a business in the Commonwealth, that bill would have had more room for incentives that would let businesses and employers keep their own money and invest it rather than only spending, which is largely what we got in the bill.